What's up, Algebra 2? So I was going to show you the answers for the homework tonight that I assigned before our test tomorrow. When you do this whole process, you should have gotten x squared plus 2x minus 2 plus 15 back over the original divider of 2x plus 3. So I know some of this can look a little sloppy, so I'm going to kind of walk through it real quick. 2 divides by 2 to be 1. 3 minus 1 for the power rule, you get 2. When you distribute this, you should get 2x to the third plus 3x squared. Now I'll put a red minus there because you're really subtracting to get 4 as a positive. And then we just repeat the process until you get all of this at the end. You should end up with 15. Okay. All right, the next one I assigned was number 11. Use synthetic division to completely factor. And we got to use the -5 here. It's what makes this 0. So I'm going to drop, multiply, add, multiply, add, multiply, and you get 0. And so it says to completely factor it. So what's left over is x squared minus 2x minus 3. What multiplies to be -3 but adds to be -2. That's -3 and 1. And so those are the other two factors. So what I did was I just dropped down the x plus 5 that was also a factor, and then this right here is your fully factored polynomial. If you notice this -15 here, that's what you would get when you multiply all of these numbers together. -3 times 1 is -3 times 5 again, -15. Of course, there's a lot more going on there than that to get the rest of it, but that is one thing I always do to check to make sure I got it correct. So we talked about finding all the zeros of number 12. I think we talked about 13. I think I assigned 14 here. So first it says find all the zeros of the polynomial. So I'm going to graph it in my graphing calculator, and it looked like this cubic. But I only had 1 0. It's supposed to have 3. So I went ahead and drew my synthetic division process up here, and I wrote all the coefficients from the problem. And again, I'm looking at the 0 here, and I will use that number exactly. It's not like if they give you a factor like another problem. So I'm going to drop, multiply, add until I get to the very end, and it turns into 1x squared minus 2x plus 2. And some of the problems when you do this, that number in the middle is 0, and so you can use square rooting to solve. It's a little quicker. But for this one, since I had 3 values, I'm going to have to use the quadratic formula. So I start putting everything into the formula here. The discriminant calculates -4, and that ends up being 2i, and then everything divides by 2, and so I end up getting 1 plus or minus I. So the original 2 that we used in synthetic division is one of the zeros, and then here are 2 more zeros. Number 18, this is one that a few people were concerned about. I won't give you anything quite like this on the test maybe, but see, I said maybe. A box is to be mailed. The volume is given by this expression, and then the height is given as x minus 8. So here's the idea. You're just trying to figure out if x minus 8 seems to be a factor. Well, let's use the fact that 8 would make that 0. And then we're going to plug that in using synthetic division to see what the rest of it is. So once we get to the end and we get a 0, we take this polynomial and turn it right back into something with x in it. We think about factoring as 15 is what we're multiplying to be, -8 is what we're adding to be, and so those two numbers are -3 and -5. What makes that 0 is 3 and 5. And so that is our dimensions. Assume the width is greater than the length. If the width is greater, then that means that it's 5, and the length must be 3. Because volume is calculated by length times width times height. So there you go. We talked about 19. Let's look at 20. So really I'm trying to figure out which ones are bouncing where, and so it looks like this one bounces at 0. So I'm looking for something where the x on the outside is squared, and then I double check the rest of it. 2 is supposed to be the other place it crosses, so that's B. This one's a cubic that should cross at 1. it's also crossing at -1 and also -3. So that seems to be this one right here. So notice that it's the opposite signs for this, and so that one must be A. This one seems to be bouncing at the 0, that's a 1. So it's going through right there, but it's bouncing here at 1, and the other one's supposed to be -2, and it's going through. So I'm thinking that that one is C. And this last one, if you notice, it has 1 minus x, so you could kind of flip that and bring a negative out front if you wanted to divide a negative out. That's why it's actually in a negative odd graph here. But 0 out front, that's the origin. -2 makes that 0, that's right here. And then 1 minus 1 would make that 0, so that's where it's crossing at 1, so that one would be. Alright, thank you so much for watching the video, and we'll answer any questions that you have tomorrow. Peace.